You have a replica of the state typical record for Kansas. Is that right? Behind you?
One day, he pulled out an old Polaroid picture of it out of his dresser drawer. He thought he remembered hearing 200 inches net. And I was just like, dude, there's no way,
I think it was something like there's only been 25 known 200-inch net typicals to walk the earth. And your dad shot one of them. Matt, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Good. I've came across a post on Facebook and thought I had to get you on the podcast and hear the full story of a really piece of crazy whitetail history. And I feel like people always wonder of how many giant deer are kind of like this lost in the mix or gobbled up by a collector. And you have a replica of the state typical record for Kansas. Is that right? Behind you?
Sure.
Yeah. So Matt, tell us a little bit who you are, where you're from, and man, I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, my name's Matt Daniels. I'm from Audible, Kansas. Currently live in Melbourne, Kansas.
And your dad shot a ginormous deer. Was it 1995?
Yeah, before I was born.
Yeah. So before you were born, and he shot this giant deer. And I guess just tell me about the story that obviously from your dad, and then we'll build up to the saga afterwards.
Yep. So my dad kind of took up bow hunting in the early 90s. I think 91 was the first year that he bow hunted. And, he wasn't no trophy hunter, never been into that or nothing. So, yeah, just was lucky enough to get this deer. He was hunting a big farm. It was full of cedars. Never been in there before. Walked in there, third week of October is what he recalls it as. Climbed in a cedar, literally just sitting on the branch in a cedar. You could see about 15 yards. That was all he could see through that. That deer happened to come through. He said he knew it hit far back, so backed out and took up the track the next day and ended up finding it.
Man, so to dial back 1995, no cell cameras, no trail cameras, just a completely different style of hunting to what you're accustomed to what I'm accustomed to. And, was obviously new to bow hunting and ends up arrowing once in a lifetime is not even a fair description of that, because we've had antler collectors on the past, and this deer netted at 200 inches flat, correct?
200 even.
Yeah, so netted at 200 even, which I want to say, and I can't recall what antler collector was on here, but I think it was something like there's only been 25 known 200-inch net typicals to walk the earth, and your dad shot one of them. So once in a lifetime is not a fair description of how rare that deer is. And so he shot that buck in 1995. Obviously, he had to know it was huge. I mean, what does he recall from that? Or was he just hunting to hunt and like, yeah, it's a big deer, and didn't have a clue what he shot?
Yeah, I've talked to him, and to me, if I would have shot that deer, my reaction would have been totally different than his. But he was into it for the meat, So he didn't even care. If it would have been a spike, he still would have shot it.
Oh, my gosh.
Obviously he knew it was a big deer. He went ahead and had it mounted, but never had it scored, never cared. Still, he doesn't really care much about the record.
Growing up, when did you discover, like, when did you first hear about the story from your dad? And like, at what point did you realize, like, oh my gosh, this thing was special?
Yeah. Growing up, so my dad's house, it's covered in deer antlers. He's got mounts and racks all the way around his living room. I kind of took bow hunting. I think 2016 was my first year. I would have been 15 years old. And I'd never even heard about this deer, honestly. And one day he pulled out an old Polaroid picture of it out of his dresser drawer and showed me. And it's a picture of it hanging up in his living room. And I'm just like, that thing is freaking huge, You can tell just from the picture. And like I said, he never had it scored. The gentleman he sold it to was the first to ever score it. And he thought he remembered hearing 200 inches net. And I was just like, dude, there's no way, There's no way. So from there, I took that Polaroid picture, took a photo of it with my phone, and posted it in the Kansas Hunting and Fishing Facebook group back in 2017. Just trying to see if anybody had heard of the deer, known of it, knew where it was, just anything really.
And so you posted that because you're thinking, oh my gosh, my dad shot a ginormous deer, and I'm sure you wanted to know more details about it more than what your dad recalled. And so you posted it in that group. What did you figure out, or was it like, what was that like?
I didn't really think there was any chance on finding it. I at that time, I didn't realize that there was such a big, antler collectors were even a thing. And I remember posting it in the afternoon, and there were some comments just, hey, that's a big deer. Hope you find it. And then I wake up the next morning to, a bunch of messages. And within 24 hours of that post, I was in contact with the person who was in possession of the rack.
Oh my gosh. And so let me back up. So the first antler collector that bought it, do you have any idea how much they bought it and what year that was?
Yeah, so my dad thinks he sold it in 2001, would have been the year I was born, and he remembers it was around 8 to 9,000 is what he sold it for.
Okay. Which he had to think at that point, he was like, man, someone's going to pay me $8,000 for this. That's crazy. Because he didn't realize what it was.
Yeah, like I said, he's never had any of the deer scored that are in his house, and he got into some financial stuff, so he made money and ended up just selling it.
Does he remember how the antler collector found him in the first place?
I don't remember. I've really never discussed that with him.
Yeah.
Sure, if the first guy that bought it was a collector, like a major collector, or what the background is on that.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so then sold it around 2001. You posted it was 2016. You said on a Facebook group, or was it 2017?
2017 was when I posted it.
So in 2017, so there's a gap of 16 years. You posted on Facebook, and then like the snap of a finger, you're in contact with who owned it at that time. The person that owned it in 2017, was that the same collector that bought it from your dad originally, or had it changed hands again since then?
Yeah, it had actually changed hands several times over the years between that time. The guy that had it when I first was looking for it was Harvey Libby. He's got a antler museum up in Maine, so he's a pretty big collector up there. And I think it's changed hands 3 times between my dad and him.
So it's changed 3 times since your dad had sold it, is what you said? You cut out for a second.
Between my dad and Libby, I think it had already went through 3 other hands.
Wow. And so when you spoke with him, were you like, hey, can I buy it? What's your goals with it? I mean, how'd that conversation go? I mean, what'd you learn?
Yeah, so I first reached out to him. I called the museum. I had rumors that he had that rack. I kind of told him who I was, what I was doing, what I was looking for. And then from that point, he kind of wanted to just do handwritten letters back and forth. So over the period of the next couple of years, we did handwritten letters, just sending them back and forth through the mail. So I sent him a picture of that Polaroid to kind of show him what the rack was, and he confirmed with me that he did have it. I told him, we would love to have it back. My dad killed it. I think it belongs in Kansas. If it gets recognized as a record, that's where it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, he decided that he would part ways with it and gave me a price on it, which was very steep. I thought it was just crazy to think that Antlers would ever bring that much money.
How much? So, well, first off, it's crazy you guys wrote letters back and forth in the world. Like you found out where it was in 24 hours, and then you were stuck to, I'm sure, opening the mailbox every day, just hoping like heck you got a letter back, which is it's almost comical of how that was the form of communication.
I still got a stack of all them letters.
How many letters do you think you guys wrote back and forth over the years?
Probably 5 or 6.
Yeah. So 5 or 6, and you finally get him to where he says, okay, I'll part ways with it. Do you remember, or do you want to say how much he was requesting for you to potentially buy it?
Yeah, he was wanting $39,500 for it.
Did your heart sink when you read that in the letter?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, never going to be possible. That was my. It's over.
Yeah, and so, I was reading an article from Outdoor Life, and so did you? 39,500 was the price tag to buy it back. You're a young guy, and that's a lot of money for anyone to begin with, which, had to feel like it was just not realistic whatsoever. And then you started a GoFundMe. How were you able to raise funds for that, or fell short, or what was that process like? And I feel so what year would that have been when you got a price?
So it would have been around 2018. I would have been 6 at the time. And when I first read the letter, I kind of just instantly gave up on it. I had no plans on trying to raise funds or anything. But I had made several posts on that Kansas Hunting and Fishing Facebook group, just kind of updating everybody. There was people following along the journey, the story of the deer. And so I posted on there, this is the price. It seems like the journey's coming to an end because it's not going to happen. And just hundreds of people on there, are willing to donate money. They're saying, start a GoFundMe.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it just sounded crazy. I was like, there's no way people are going to, just a kid trying to get a deer antlers. But
yeah.
So and it was up for a few months. At first, it was going great. It was raising money really fast, and I was very surprised with that. But after a few months, everything kind of went stale. I was trying to get people to share it around, and it was just a realization that the goal amount wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. How far short did you fall to the goal amount?
I think I ended up raising just under 15,000.
Oh man, I wish hindsight, right? I wish we would have crossed paths, could have done, a conversation like this to try to raise some more funds. I mean, that's, raising almost $40,000 is obviously a bunch of money, but if you were able to do that just through that Facebook group, that's actually really remarkable that you were able to do so. And I don't know, that's a tough break for sure. And I can't imagine just like the emotional roller coaster that you had been on of, from the point of discovery to the point of, okay, this is the person that has it, to eventually getting a price and then raising, almost half of it or just a little bit less than half of it, and then to fall short. And so at that point, you realize, okay, the GoFundMe, I'm not gonna be able to have the funds in order to do so. What happens next?
Yeah, so I dropped the GoFundMe. The way GoFundMe works is if you don't reach your goal and you drop it, automatically refunds everybody who donated.
And so everyone gets refunded because you didn't hit the goal amount. And then did you just kind of give up on things? Or, I mean, because obviously the story continues to progress. And like, what was the timeline of, okay, I wasn't able to raise the funds. I've pretty much given up at this rate, and maybe I'll go to Maine and go see the thing in person someday. Was that kind of your thought process?
Well, I reached out to Harvey Libby and told him, give me a little bit. I'm going to try to raise money. And I think he told me I would have to go dig up the letters, but I'm pretty sure he told me he'd give me 6 to raise the funds.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to try to get rid of the rack anyways. And so kind of the other side of the story is after my dad had sold this rack, I can't remember the person he sold it to, but I believe that guy passed away. And,
wow.
and the rack ended up getting sold at like a estate sale or something. So after that point, nobody knew the deer had came from Kansas. There was basically no history on the rack at that point. So,
and it was just a giant deer that no one knew the history of.
Not typical, that nobody knew where it came from. So that is the main reason it was never entered into Boone and Crockett or anything throughout the years, because in order to enter it, you have to have the history on where the deer came from. Mm-hmm. So Harvey Libby was actually an official Boone and Crockett scorer. And he was very happy that we kind of linked up because I had the missing information,
Yeah.
So he ended up getting it entered, I believe, or had tried to. And he was wanting my dad to sign some paperwork to get it entered through Boone and Crockett. And at that point, we were kind of like, well, what are our options of getting a replica made? And he claimed that he didn't have the replica rights for the rack. Still not really sure how that works.
I haven't figured that out either. And I've asked people, antler collectors, about that. And we haven't made it happen. But Klaus, Antlers by Klaus, they actually reached out to come on the podcast at one point, and we haven't been able to connect. But that was one of the questions I have, because it's like, who has the right in order to replicate the buck? Is it your dad? Is it the person? Like, to me, it's such a obscure thing that clearly there's rules about it, and I don't know the clear answer. I'm sure someone listening to this knows the answer, but I don't. And that's another interesting point, because I've had actually I had the chance to have Jamie Martin. He's from New York. He's an antler collector, and the number 2 all-time typical, I think it's still waiting to get panel scored, but I was actually able to hold that deer. He was traveling around and cross paths with him, and I'm pretty curious about how all of this works, and just how values and how a story can impact it, or where exactly it falls in the record books impacts the value. And so I have to imagine at some point this deer had to become a lot more valuable, because now there's a story, then it officially gets scored, or at least it's deemed as a net 200-inch typical. And then if it gets entered in the books, I have to imagine it's even more valuable at that point. It's just the crazy part of, you have the antlers, there's an incredible specimen, like unreal. But then as you layer all these things, it just gets more and more and more and more valuable.
Yep. Yeah, I've kind of always thought that that's the reason Harvey Libby had decided to part ways with it once it got entered officially. I'm sure at that point it had gained significant value, especially just knowing where the deer had came from.
Yeah, and the story, right? Because you reached out to him or were able to get connected. Yeah, I feel like that's probably, you're right. I feel like that had to be a really big part of it. And so reading along here, I know that, and I'm just looking at the Wichita Eagle, another article that I was reading, which is pretty interesting. But eventually Keith Snyder, so did Libby sell it to Keith Snyder from your understanding?
That's what I understand. Yep.
Okay, so because we did a whitetail cribs with Keith Snyder, and his collection was just unmatched. And now I'm wondering if your dad's deer was in the collection at the time when we did the cribs or not, or maybe he had sold it already, because that would have been probably 2020, I'm gonna guess, is when we were there. And so did you try reaching out to Keith, and like you weren't able to buy it from Libby? Did you try reaching out to Keith to hopefully try to buy it then, or what was the progression there?
Yeah, so when I found out that Keith Snyder had purchased it, I reached out to him through Facebook, and he confirmed with me he had it. He sent me a bunch of photos of it in its current condition and everything. And we talked back and forth. We were friendly with each other. And then it got to the point where, I was like, is there any chance you would sell it? And absolutely not. He said he wasn't going to sell it. So then I tried working with him on a replica. That was my next goal. I kind of, at this point in time, I figured I would never actually be able to own the real rack. So my goal was to get a replica of it. So at first he was acting like he was going to work with me on it, told me he was going to look into it, see what he could do. I'm not sure what efforts he actually put into it, but it got to the point where he stopped messaging me back. I would reach out and just no response.
So at that point, you're still trying to hopefully just get a replica, and then what happens next?
Yeah, so I know he had sent me an invite to some big deer show. I want to say it was in like Henrietta, Ohio. I don't know if maybe it was the Whitetail Rendezvous or something. And he had told me it was going to be on display there, and wanted me to come up there to see it. And I had booked the trip, made plans to go up there, and it was, I think, less than a week before he told me it wasn't going to be there anymore.
Oh,
so
man.
if at that time was when Bass Pro took possession of the rack, I don't know what that timeline was. But eventually, I reached out to him again. Hey, I'm just, where are we at on the replica, and his response was Bass Pro now has it. And that was pretty much the end of me talking with Keith Snyder.
Man, you've been run through the ringer here. Dang. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so Bass Pro has it. So then I'm sure your next thing is, okay, how do I get in contact with this massive corporation to figure out who the heck handles the Antler division or the museum or the collection of Bass Pro? Because they have a really impressive collection, right? Anyone goes to the stores and you can see all the replicas of all these iconic whitetails on the wall. And so what was the first thing? How did you even try to get in contact with Bass Pro? Because I have to imagine that was an uphill battle just to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, so all the information I had was it was supposed to be on display in their Wildlife Museum, which is at their Springfield headquartered location. So I called there, talked to somebody at the museum. They said they couldn't release any information on what was in it, which makes sense to me. So at that point, I was planning a trip down there. I think it's about 6 hours from me. But I had a friend that went, and he didn't see it there. So at that point, I tried calling. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody like upper management with Bass Pro, which is impossible.
Yeah.
Like I bet every bit of 50 emails, to Bass Pro, calling them. They would give me a number to, this extension, leave a voicemail. and it was monthly for years, like 2 to 3 years. Every month I would send an email, leave a voicemail. Never once did I get a response at all.
Man, well, kudos for you for sticking with it and not giving up. And so you're just going on a wild goose chase, sending emails and leaving voicemails with everyone. When did they officially? How did you eventually get a reply? Did you eventually get to the right email with the right extension, or catch someone on the right day, or how'd you end up getting a hold of them?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There was just one day I was sitting at work and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna call them again, leave another voicemail, and it was like an hour later I got an email back. And honestly, when I first seen who it was from, I thought it was some kind of scam email, you know.
Yeah.
Sure enough, it was a response from Bass Pro. They were confirmed with me they had it. It was not on display at the museum. So I ended up getting a phone call and talking with the lady that was kind of in charge there. She's actually no longer employed by Bass Pro, but they confirmed they had replicas made already. They couldn't tell me what locations they were at for some reason, but she did say they were not in Kansas.
Interesting. And so they made replicas, and you finally got a hold of the right person. And when what was your email like? Hey, this is Matt. I think you have a antler that my dad, a set of antlers that my dad shot. It's the Kansas state record, typical. And I was hoping to, like, what were you asking in those emails, to try to get a replica, or
I mean, first,
what were you saying?
yeah, I mean, I was just trying to confirm that they did in fact
Mm.
have, because at that time it was just a rumor. I had
True.
friends go to the museum, it wasn't there, so at this point I didn't have any proof that Bass Pro was in possession of it. And what kind of confirmed that for me was somebody sent me a link to the Boone and Crockett book that they put out. I think they do one every 3 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, and it was entered in there under Bass Pro Shops as the owner.
So how did officially get entered in the books, when typically they had to sign like an affidavit? Like your dad would have to sign an affidavit that said, I didn't poach this deer, I killed it legally. How did that happen?
Yeah, see, I've kind of looked back on that too, and I can't remember my dad ever signing any paperwork. But he may have without me knowing. He
Sure.
may have, because he does have a certificate from Boone and Crockett stating, congratulations, you killed a 200-inch typical kind of deal. So I'm assuming at some point he did sign something and just doesn't remember.
Mm-hmm. What year was the certificate? Did it show up after he had sold it, or was it dated back to the 90s? Or when did he get that certificate, you think?
It was current to when he received it. It would have just been, a few years ago.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Because I mean that definitely increases the value even more, right? That it's officially, man, that's crazy. So how come, when did it break the news? Because I definitely could have missed it. Was there a time when he got that certificate was there a buzz or news that, new Kansas state typical record, or is that just happening right now?
Yeah. So the way Kansas works is if you look up right now, the records for Kansas, it's still not listed in there yet. Boone and Crockett had officially listed it as the largest typical whitetail in Kansas. I want to say it was entered in 19 or 20.
Okay.
That was official. I've been working with the state, and I'm going through some loops right now because I have to get an official score sheet for it, but Boone and Crockett will only release an official score sheet to the current owner of the rack, which is Bass Pro. So now I'm going through these loops over again, trying to get a hold of Bass Pro to see if I can just get an official score sheet and then send them an affidavit signed by my dad. So I'm working through that process right now.
Nothing's been easy along this journey for you, has it?
No, not at all.
And so, going back to Bass Pro, and that you have a replica now. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so they reached out to me, and I told them, this is my goal. I've been told them the story. First of all, I've been chasing this dang rack down for 7 years now, and they reached out to me in September of this year, and basically just right away, they were like, well, we've already had replicas made. You can get one made. Send me contact to Antlers by Klaus. And Bass Pro was wanting me to do a third-party deal with them to where I pay Bass Pro, they have the replica made, shipped to them, and then they ship the replica to me, kind of thing. But when I reached out to Antlers by Klaus, I decided just to go directly through them. They said it wouldn't be an issue, a lot faster that way. Through they told me you're looking at 4 to 6 months to get the replica. But when I got in contact with Antlers by Klaus, told them the story, she kind of jumped me to the top of the line, I guess. And literally within, I want to say 5 weeks, I had the rack in my hands.
That's really cool. Wow. That's really cool. And so you had to pay for that out of pocket, I assume?
Yep.
Yeah. Was it, I'm sure it was money well spent after spending that much time and effort to getting it, to making it happen. Oh my gosh.
I never thought twice about it on this deer. If it was a personal deer that I shot, I wouldn't spend that much on a mount. But for this one, I didn't think twice.
Well, yeah, it's a piece of history, and you worked really hard to get your hands on it. I mean, that was kind of the goal along the way, and everyone just said, I don't know who has the reproduction rights, whatever the case may be. What was it like putting your hands on the replica when it came out of the mail? I mean, that had to be, because at this point you had only seen pictures of it. From collectors that had sent you pictures of it, and that was the first time I imagine you're taking it out of like a metal or a wooden crate or something, and you're popping it off and you open it up. What was that like to see it?
It was definitely a special moment for me. I had some friends and family members that were kind of in on the deal. We were definitely keeping it a secret from my dad. So everyone was there when we opened it, and it was definitely a special moment. It was like being a little kid on Christmas morning.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And what was your dad's reaction? Like, oh, yep, that's what it looked like.
My dad wasn't there.
Oh no, he wasn't there when you did it.
We kept it a secret from him until the mount was done.
So, okay. And what was his reaction when he finally saw it?
Yeah, so he seen it Christmas Eve, just a few days ago when he saw it.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, all these articles have been out, and I've been trying, I haven't shared them around or anything because he still doesn't know. And luckily enough, he never found one of the articles on Facebook when they were getting thrown around.
Yeah.
It was pretty tough, but yeah, he came over Christmas Eve for dinner, and that's when we broke the news to him, and he was definitely in shock. He knew about my journey, but he thought I gave up on it like 4 years ago. So he had no clue at all that I was still, trying to go through with something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was his reaction like?
Yeah, he just couldn't believe it, man.
That had to be so surreal for him, and he had to be pretty darn proud that you stuck with it and made it happen. And obviously, he doesn't sound like a guy that's chasing accolades by any means, but it has to be pretty darn cool to see his son track down and get a replica. And those replicas are so darn real looking that you wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, I think that's. I think he's more proud of the journey of me, getting the journey I went through than he is of getting recognition for the deer. He doesn't care about the record or anything like that. That was on me to kind of, you deserve it, Dad, and the deer deserves it. There's only, I think, 24 deer this large in the world.
Yeah,
deer definitely deserves some recognition too, and that was one of my main goals.
Well, it's probably it's got to be top 20.
Yeah,
it's got to be. It's harvested by a hunter.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, probably like 17 or 18, which is just so crazy. And that's where I had with some. I went down a rabbit hole earlier this year with antler collectors, and the question is always how many other giant deer are in a collection that no one knows about, or something crazy like that. And it seems like these are surfacing more and more. And I say there's like 2, but it's still 2 more than what it's been like in the past, or at least that's caught my attention. And it just begs the question of, is the world record typical in someone's basement? Well, at one point, the San Mahupa buck, it was the world. It was for a short brief time, but man, that's fascinating. What's one thing that has surprised you throughout this whole journey?
I mean, it's been a rough journey. There's been a lot of controversy on it. There's been a lot of people that have reached out to me telling me the story's fake, that there's no way this is real. Nobody would have a 200-inch and sell it or not know what it scored. So I've had to deal with that. And now that it's getting recognized, through social media and all that, and it's going to be updated as the Kansas state record, I expect a lot more of that to come.
Yeah, it's truly fascinating that's how long, it took you 7 years to, find it or, put your hands on a replica. And then has Bass Pro put it in a museum yet, or is it still not on display, or what do you know about that?
Yeah, from my understanding, I've only had a phone call with them once. They're so hard to get a hold of. And she had told me there's 2 locations that have replicas on display. And for some reason, they didn't give me a reason, but they said the real rack is never going to be on display. Not sure if that's because of, they're worried about somebody stealing it from a museum it makes sense, but it's kind of a sad ordeal that it's just going to sit and collect dust for eternity,
Yeah. Or it's probably in the owner's like private collection would be maybe the, the other thing too. Yeah. Well, I wonder what 2 locations are. I would ask anyone listening to this that's seen this buck at a Bass Pro location. I feel like you would definitely want to know which one it's. Obviously, you can just look behind you and see it, but it would be kind of fun to go and see it with all the other legendary whitetails.
Yeah, so I kind of have a side goal now. I'm gonna reach out to. We have a Bass Pro here about an hour away, and then a Cabela is a little bit farther. And I'm gonna try to reach out to those locations and see if they would be interested in getting replicas and putting on display at those locations.
Yeah,
why wouldn't you want the Kansas state record on display at a Kansas location?
that makes perfect sense, right? Yeah, that seems very logical. Man, what anything else throughout this whole process that surprised you, or obviously you mentioned there's been some controversy of people just saying like this is full of crap, but I have to imagine you've had a lot of people, support you or words of encouragement. Obviously, gosh, you raised almost 16 grand in the GoFundMe. So, you've had to connect with a lot of really great people along this way too.
Yeah, I think the best thing that I found throughout this journey, now given I was 15 years old when I started this, so I was still a kid, but just the community around deer and deer antler collection and all of that. I just never would have imagined that there's so many good people. There's a lot of bad people in it too, but the good definitely outweighs the bad. And like I've met a lot of good people through this journey, talked to hundreds of people about this story, trying to track this thing down. And I'm just thankful for everybody that's helped along the way. There's a lot of people to have.
It's fascinating to me. Like that's what's most crazy and maddening is just understanding the antler collection world, because it's so fascinating that those antlers change hands quite often is what it seems like. And it's just, I didn't know there was like a year ago when I dove into this, I did not realize how massive it was until I still don't know. Right. Like I only know what I do know, and it's very little in the grand scheme of things. And I have to imagine that, throughout that process, I would just love to know what all those antler collectors have in their private collections and just see them. Cause there's like so much whitetail history that I feel that it gets lost. And your dad's deer could have been lost in the history. If you never found that Polaroid picture, it would have just been a 200-inch typical that no one knows the backstory about.
Exactly.
And now, yeah, that's crazy, man. Well, anything else you can think of here?
Not really. It's just been a wild journey, and it has a happy ending. So that's the best part of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and getting back to me so quickly. We put this together really quickly, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I enjoyed learning about it and hearing it, directly from you and the process regarding it. If you want to share how people can get connected with you, you're more than welcome to do that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. If anybody has any questions, the best way to reach out to me would just be through Facebook.
What's your full name on Facebook so people can find you?
Matthew Daniels.
Matthew Daniels. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great new year. And if you have any other exciting revelations regarding the story, I definitely want to hear them.
Sounds good. Thank you.